Introducing LT Defense Tactical Gear, your ultimate solution for top-notch protection and performance in the field. Our armor bundles provide unmatched safety and comfort, while our battle belts and holsters ensure quick and easy access to your gear. Stay prepared for any situation with our high-quality medical supplies, designed to keep you ready for action at all times. Looking to enhance your skills? Our firearms training programs will take your proficiency to the next level. Trust LT Defense for all your tactical gear needs and gear up for success on the battlefield.
The fact that our patriotism in America is dwindling, I really wanted to start the American AF movement. Freedom is fragile, very fragile. It takes a certain level of intestinal fortitude to stand up and say and do the right thing to preserve the freedoms that so many have paid a large price for.
American tactical. American as f***.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Welcome to the Motivated Mindset with your host, me, Jose Flores, and we are going to go into the why behind what we do in life. Have you ever wondered what truly drives people? I know I do. What fuels their purpose and motivation? In this podcast, we're going to explore those profound questions, uncovering the stories and insights that shape our journeys. Join me as we navigate in the depths of human ambition and uncover the secrets to living a fulfilled life, purpose, and driven. Let's get motivated. Thank you. Hey, welcome to the Motivated Mindset. I'm your host, Jose Flores. And you know what? It's a pleasure to have you here. A little bit about me. I'm a proud son of Brooklyn, New York, and a veteran of 30 years of service in the Army. And I'm a firm believer in staying active, both in body and in my community. As a certified personal trainer, I keep pushing myself physically, but in my dedication to giving back to what drives me every day through organizations like Team Red, White, and Blue, Wounded Warrior Project, and others organizations like that. So, thank you for joining me on this journey of purpose, resilience, and growth. Today, I am so thrilled. Yay, what's up? Oh, my goodness. Okay, Jose, chill, get it back. I'm thrilled to introduce my good friend, Dan Collins, a powerhouse in the world of documentary filmmaking, and Dan is an award-winning director, producer, and editor with unique talents for telling stories that ignite social change. In this episode, we'll dive into Dan's journey as a filmmaker and his dedication to capturing stories that matter, for example, to address issues like responsible journalism and the importance of free press. But Dan doesn't just focus on storytelling. He's passionate about examining today's challenges through a leadership lens, using his work to inspire others to think critically and lead with purpose. So join us as we go behind the scenes of this impactful projects and explore how he uses his creativity to bring awareness and drive positive change in our world. And without further ado, let's bring him on.
Interview of the week sponsored by LTD Tactical.
Hey, welcome, Dan. Welcome.
How are you, brother?
Hey, good. Hey, we're working it, man. Good to you. I'll see you on the screen a little bit, but I'm just glad that you're here, and we're gonna make this work. So we are just excited that you are here, and that's my station manager right there, Mr. Joe. Hey, he's working the stuff here. But once we get on, but hey, the things that you've done, I've been just really always since the first time I met you. I'm glad that you came into my life, but I want the audience to know a little bit about you, where you're from, and what drives you to do what you do today.
Sure thing. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, brother. I'm excited to be here. You have been such an inspiration to me over all these years that we've known each other, the work we've done together. Your motivation is infectious. Your positive energy is a model for others to follow. So everything you do inspires me, and this is just a great chance to catch up with you. So first and foremost, thanks for that.
Yeah.
It's really nice to be here. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a filmmaker.
Yes.
I started out, well, I grew up in Maine. I grew up in a really small town. Didn't get a lot of exposure to the outside world as a young kid. I spent a lot of time in the woods, which is really nice, a fundamental way to grow up. Came from a very supportive family. My grandfather was a Marine, served in the Pacific in 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, Peleliu in Okinawa. And I grew up hearing a lot of stories from him and learned a lot of my Marine Corps lore from him, which, as you know, came into play later as you and I started working together with veterans.
Yes,
At an organization called Common Ground on the Hill, which we'll get to.
Yes.
But yeah, basically, when I was a teenager, I got exposed to documentary through a film about the civil rights movement, a film series called Eyes on the Prize. And so when I saw that as a young man, really just a kid, basically, it blew my mind that you could have a true story that was as powerful as like a Hollywood blockbuster movie. Right. And so I started looking into documentary as a way to tell stories that could hopefully create positive change. So we can get into some of the details, but fast forward to now, that's the track that I chose. And after a long journey, that's kind of been where I've spent most of my career. And I now work I wear a lot of different hats, but I'm also working at a university doing communications videos to kind of shine a light on a lot of the work that students, faculty, and staff are doing at Lehigh University to do some groundbreaking research. And part of their entire mission statement and strategic plan is about creating a better world as well. So that's part of the reason I'm there. So that's it in a nutshell. There's a lot of stuff between the lines, but that's
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so I know when we met, and Dan and I met at Common Ground on the Hill, and it was instrumental in meeting Dan because I had just came back from Iraq. And I remember when I first went to Common Ground, the Hills, what a bunch of hippies. What is going on here? What is this about? And it was a brand new world for someone like me. And then I met Dan and I met Walt Michaels and a whole lot of people there. And it kind of started changing the way I think. And I think I know we're going to talk about Common Ground and how we started that. But you said that when you watched that series about the civil rights, that ignited the fire in you. Is that correct? That's where you and that's what you're still doing. That I'm assuming that's what's carried you to where you are today.
Yeah, it was interesting. As I said, I grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere, and my mom was very good about finding stuff for me to do in the summers. She knew I was going to pretty much go crazy out in the sticks, and I got a lot of like wilderness training de facto as a kid. I mean, I grew up hunting and fishing in the streams, and I really treasure that part of my upbringing. But by the time I was a teenager, I was going crazy because it was me and the bears,
Yeah.
So she sent me this summer workshop one year at Bates College, which is one of the main state of Maine's colleges that's got a pretty good reputation there. And we were studying the civil rights movement in general. And, I had heard names like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And but in my little school, we didn't get much of an education about civil rights in general. I mean, we got whatever was in the state textbook at the time, and it wasn't much. And I'm not faulting them; it's just the way it was, right? Yeah. So, when I saw this film and got to experience like college level study of the civil rights movement in depth, like the multiple organizations involved, Students for Democratic Society, SNCC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and all of the different angles that went into that intense and righteous struggle. It blew my mind because I had never heard of this stuff in this detail. And so number one, I was like, whoa, like I need to know more about this. But number two, coming from a film, and I was already kind of a film buff. It was one of the ways you killed your time when you're up there in the woods. It was a true story. I mean, I was crying, I was laughing, I was tense. I was like, I was watching these incredible developments on screen, as anyone who studied the civil rights movement, and which you almost have to, as a citizen in this country, you see the imagery from Birmingham when, you know, there were protests that were met with attack dogs and fire hoses and all these kinds of images that we've seen over the years, and the dovetailed movements against the unjust war in Vietnam happening at the same time, student movements, all this stuff. It was really exciting when you're 15 to go, oh my God.
Right.
And, you know, this all came from a film, and I was like, what the heck is up with that? So a few years later, I was lucky enough to get into a film school program in upstate New York. And I went there and started learning how to go about telling stories through film. And it took a long time to get to a point where I was able to actually do that. I mean, even in those days in the early 90s, there was no digital equipment available. You know, we were shooting film, celluloid film, and editing with razor blades, you know, and it was mostly theory and that kind of thing. But I kind of always knew I wanted to tell stories about humans who were fighting the good fight and trying to make a difference.
Wow. So you seen the whole thing when you started, how you evolved and how filmmaking has evolved till today. You're absolutely correct. When you mentioned about school, I was never taught about the civil rights. It was never like that. It wasn't until after I was an adult that these things were made to me, and I was like, wow, that is just amazing. And you know, you are absolutely correct. It's almost like an awakening for some people, and some of the things that I've learned through going to Common Ground in the business I do now. Every day I'm learning something new. And right now I know we're going through some tough times right now. And I know we want to discuss some of those things on how we as people can make a change, you know, and what do you envision? How do you see the common person affecting change?
That is a $1 million question, my friend. I have a lot of ideas about that. And of course, I struggle a lot with feelings that I think a lot of people have about basically feeling sort of helpless as an individual in such a divided society in such a large world. How does one person make a difference? And we can go into a lot of conversation about that, but I learned some wisdom from Walt Michael, who is the director of Common Ground on the Hill, which is this nonprofit arts organization where you and I met.
Yes, sir.
And I you know, he was a mentor to me, and I first met Walt when I was about 20 years old, and he had been part of the civil rights movement as an ally and as a supporter, and was just a guy that I looked to for wisdom. And I basically asked him that question: how do we make a difference? How can one person do anything against this flood of crazy situations in the world, regardless of what your particular issue might be? And he basically said to me, and I know he quoted this from someone that he got it from, but he basically said to me, the best ones do one thing a day. Like, you can't do it all, right? But you can do one thing a day. And if you focus on making incremental changes step by step by step, then in the end, you can look back and see that you've had an impact. So I've always started there, you know, on my most frustrating days, you know, when I'm like overwhelmed about, you know, take your pick of issues, but I start there. What can I do today? And I don't always succeed. Like, I don't want to give the impression I always succeed at this, or that I've had some kind of monumental impact, because I kind of feel like I have not. But you know, you pick a thing, and much like we learn about important issues from allies and friends, right? If you want to discuss a volatile issue, and a stranger or a television pundit or a you know a news article is trying to convey that information, there's a disconnect there. But if your friend says, hey, I want to tell you about this thing because it's affected me, even if that thing goes against what you think your core belief systems are, you can learn on a one-to-one basis. And just in that same way, you can affect change on a one-to-one basis. So right now, in this society at this time, I think it's about reconnecting with neighbors, talking to people on your block, having an open mind, and being willing to listen more than you speak. And, you know, we'll get into this, but like on an issue like immigration, which is very close to my heart, very close to your heart, that's a really volatile issue, and it's very misunderstood. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of terrible negative stereotypes I personally believe immigrants are the cornerstone of this nation.
Mhm.
If you live here and you are not 100% native blood, you're an immigrant. So I'm Irish. There was a time when Irish immigrants were vilified, Italian immigrants were vilified, and now we're seeing a whole new waves of immigrants being vilified unfairly, right? And so if I go up to a stranger and try to have that conversation, depending on their beliefs, that might just immediately butt heads.
Yes.
But if you can humanize those issues with a civil conversation, you know, civil discourse is another thing we really got to work on as a culture right now. Then you can start to bridge those gaps. So
Yes.
that's my dime store advice: is one step at a time, one neighbor to another. You know.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I'm of Latin descent. You know, my dad's from Puerto Rico and my mom is from Dominican Republic, and I'll never forget the first time that somebody called me. It was in Oklahoma, Fort Sill, and I went to a bar and somebody called me a wetback, and I didn't know what that meant. I was like, and I was with another guy named Cook from Alabama. He said, "Jose, we need to leave." I was 17. And when he told me what that meant, I felt so devalued. Like, what? I don't even know this guy. Why is he calling me that name? So when we do that, you know, what's happening in society now, especially as we speak in the present, that is happening right now. Everything you said is so right on. And depending, you don't even know who you can talk to without offending somebody and getting in a fight, you know. But that I agree. Each of us can make a difference if we get it there, you know. I really believe that, and I know one of the things we learned that I looked through Walt and Pam and Charlie, so many. I mean, it is so deep, and I picked up a lot of stuff there. So I agree, and I think that's influencing the way that you see your life through the lens of filming. Oh, hey, so that time we're gonna take a station break. And we'll come right back to that what we're talking about. Let me see. I know I got a favorite song here that I want to play. And yeah, let me see. I gotta go up. Here we go. Yeah, I got it. Well, okay. Yeah. And once we come back off break, we will talk about it. Let me see. Yep.
Hold on, things are busy, spinning rapidly. To miss another beat is such a tragedy. Now this moment feels like all eternity. It should feel so comfortable. It's all in the secrets of the open hearts club. Tear it down, there is no need to scream and shout. When everything seems crazy, reflection now. A peace of mind should not include deception's help. It should feel so comfortable. All lives tear into the scene, leaving bad taste in our memories. How can we all find change? It's all in the secrets of the open hearts. Honestly,
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program.
All right. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to Motivated Mindset, where we give veterans a voice on this station. All right, Dan, well, we're back. Whoo, excitement's in there. I'm going through my head. What am I going to ask you? But you know what I really want to talk about also is I know you mentioned about leadership, and I'll leave it up to you. We can do the leadership, or we can show the trailers of the films you worked on, because that's so important for the award you won. You let me know, and we'll take it from there, sir.
Yeah, well, why don't we we'll talk about some kind of overarching concepts real quick that kind of inform the work that I do and the conversations we were just having, and also that pretty banging song you just played, which is pretty cool. It reminded me of Josh Heisel a little bit. Man. I know. Like positive vibes, right? Yeah, so my trip right now is that we are, our society is desperately in need of a new kind of leadership for the 21st century. And I don't mean a top-down leadership, although there's a good need for some of that as well. I'm talking about a bottom-up leadership that citizens take upon themselves to create the kind of culture and sort of systems of civility and positivity and progress that I think a lot of people need. And I'll preface that by saying that there are a lot of people who are overlooked in our society. Some of those people are indeed invisible, off the radar, like undocumented immigrants who have become a scapegoat in this country for so many issues. But that's not all. Veterans are also very overlooked in this country. There's a lot of lip service paid to thank you for your service. You're a bunch of heroes. But when the rubber hits the road, there's a big gap between what veterans need and deserve and what they're getting, both from government programs and from society at large. And there are other groups as well. I mean, there's a lot of urban poverty and there's a lot of rural poverty. And I think something that really gets missed in our society is that there's a lot of people out there in the woods, like where I grew up, poor whites in a lot of cases, who are also suffering. And of course, poor Black and brown people in the cities who are suffering. And somehow all these people and all these groups have been pitted against each other. And you've got different groups of people believing that the other one is the enemy. We see a lot of that in the political discourse right now, right? Where it's a lot easier to convince people that other suffering, overlooked people are in fact trying to take resources from them, when in fact there are overarching systems that are kind of pushing everybody down at once. And, you know, I think the only way that we're going to move forward as a nation is to stop blaming each other for problems that are actually being caused from the top down. I'm not going to get into specifics because, again, I'm here to like have positive, progressive conversations about solutions. So I don't want to start pointing fingers at who's saying what. I think we all have an idea of like how much toxicity there is right now in political dialogue, especially approaching this election. It's not just from presidential candidates. You hear it in Congress, you hear it in school board meetings, you hear it on the news, right? So my challenge to myself to stay sane in all of that is how do you put that, mute that, all that for a minute and try to figure out how to lead from the bottom up, right? And as we said, it's about building relationships with neighbors and also with strangers who have more in common with you than you think. Right. I don't have all the solutions on how that happens. I wish there were more resources to make that happen. And as my career advances, you know, I'm starting to think that might be the direction that I want to go in my next chapter is from using media as a tool to create change. How do I help create systems where people have opportunities to meet in smaller groups with people that they think they don't agree with, in order to find out that they actually agree on a lot more than they disagree. I mean, we all want 3 square meals. We all want a safe, affordable place to live. We all want safe environments for our children to grow up. We all want decent education and healthcare opportunities. But we have been convinced that by powers that be, that one of us is trying to take those rights from the other. And it's amazing if you really boiled it down. I mean, if you just took the 2 major parties in this country and boiled it down to brass tacks, what people actually want, most of that BS gets washed away. Most people actually want the same thing. So from a leadership perspective, I think, there's a few different groups of people that I work with in my documentary film work. One focus there's a few different focuses over my career. One has been civil rights struggles and struggles for social justice historically and currently, usually in urban areas. I worked in Wilmington, Delaware for a long time, which is a small city in the mid-Atlantic that has a lot of the issues that major cities like LA and New York, Chicago have.
Right.
So I did a lot of my early film work at a company called Teleduction and Hearts and Minds Film about everything from learning about the Underground Railroad to civil rights struggles within Delaware, undocumented immigrant communities within Delaware who had come here to work, who are serving our economy, but were being treated as deplorables, right? Another topic that I've worked on a lot is veterans issues. And I made a film called From War to Wisdom, which you have seen.
Yes, I have.
With a bunch of our friends, mostly Marine Corps veterans who we met through Common Ground on the Hill. Another group that I work with and do films about is immigrant populations. And some of my films that I've done with that company in Delaware have touched on European immigration traditions and as I said, like Irish and Italians, but also mostly focusing on Latin American immigrants from the early 90s on, because that's the time that I was working on these films.
Gotcha.
And then I would say that, like, the last category is artists. I do a lot of work, especially in the last 10 years, about artists and glass artists in particular. And these range from traditional studio glass artists who are trying to celebrate beauty, like Paul Stankard, who's featured in my latest film, and guys like Slinger, who we'll probably see a trailer for tonight, he's a cannabis activist and he's a multimedia artist and a pop artist in the tradition of Andy Warhol and Banksy. And he's kind of like a culture breaker. This guy who's a really good friend of mine, I met him in film school. His whole MO is to shake up how you think you believe culture is supposed to be. And, you could argue, is that more important than veterans' rights, or is that going to have more of an impact than immigration policy or something like that? I don't really know. But what I do know is that our culture and our society is made up of all these different groups, and we all create this tapestry that we not only create it, but it in turn creates us. So all of these people have the ability to influence the overall culture that we take part in every day. Right. And we have an opportunity to make that a better place for all of our minds to live in. You know what I mean? So the work that I do usually just focuses on people who, whether they're a Marine Corps veteran trying to train service dogs specifically to help other vets with post-traumatic stress, like Kenny Bass and the Battle Buddy Foundation, or Josh Heisel, who's a military combat veteran who writes songs about his experience and now works with adjudicated youth, like in Ohio, keeping kids one by one out of the prison system. Do you imagine, Heisel, can you imagine having his Marine Corps pointed at you when you're 16? Quit messing up. Here's how we're going to go from here on out. He's like a compassionate badass,
Right. He is a badass. Yeah.
So again, just from a leadership perspective, some of my films might sit in like one category or another, but every time I approach one, I'm really thinking, how can this move the needle in terms of how we understand each other? And that sounds kind of grandiose, but you know me, man. I think in big ideas. So.
I know you, bro. I believe it. No, Roger. Because sometimes they make it seem like we're all crabs in a bucket when we're all really on the same, pulling each other down, and it is challenging. It is. I try to control what's in my space, what I can affect, and when I engage other people. But when you talk about leadership, like, you got to have empathy in leadership, and you can use that in your community. I think we have enough empathy or compassion. It just seems to go into something else. People are just not focusing on that. So I can relate. And we had some comments from Trace Around Podcast. He said, that is so true. We need to support one another. That is one of the things that came out. And if you have any questions, audience, please put them in the chat and we will get to them. It is so important to hear what you have to say. But I believe in you, brother. Ever since I met you, you've been straight up, and the work you're doing is making a difference. I know for this man right here, that when I met you and when I met Josh and just it changed my worldview on a lot of things, you know. So I'm really happy I met you. But yeah, we can do better every day.
Yeah, we can. And
I have a question. I don't know if I need to type it or not. I just had a question. Dan, can you tell me in your job role, like, how do you pick who works with you? Like, do you pick based on character, or do you pick based on like work ethic? From like one of your friends tells you, okay, this guy's good, or do you go by, black and white resume?
Well, usually it's in fact always through people that I know. So I've been fortunate enough that people come in and out of my life as I progress through my life.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I end up doing films about people who I've met along the way. And sometimes when I meet them, that's not the right time to tell their life story. We're growing together. Right. Josh Heisel is a great example of this. Josh Heisel is a Marine Corps veteran, 2 tours in Iraq with Fox 2-5. He was a grunt, infantryman, and he came back from the war, and he had written a lot of music and started touring. Yeah. And when I met him, it was like 2009. He came through Common Ground on the Hill as a touring musician, and he was really tore up.
Yeah.
And he had a really hard time jiving with the sort of like the hippie camp vibe that was going on in Common Ground. There's a lot of folk artists and a lot of like civil rights activists from the 60s who blamed him for what they saw as an unjust war, right? So when I met Heisel, I spent 5 years becoming best friends with that guy, staying up with him all night long, drinking too much until dawn because he couldn't sleep, learning about his experiences, telling him about the stories I heard from my grandpa from, Okinawa, which he understood that. And, so it was like I had to become very close to him and to earn his trust in order to begin to tell that story. So in a way, the stories choose me. And that's generally how it goes. Someone comes across my path that it's like chooses me, And I know we're taking a break here in a minute, so we can continue that conversation.
Yeah. You ready for a break? Here we go. Check it out. This will be the second one. Here we go. We're taking a break.
Sacred flowers, sacred mother, earth is crying for her daughters. Sacred flowers, sacred mother, earth is crying for her daughters. Where have you gone? Who took them from us? Who stole them from us? Sacred flowers. Crying for her daughters. Sacred flowers, sacred in your midst. Sacred flowers.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
All right. Okay. Hey, Dad, well, I know we left off on a couple of things, but I know as we're moving forward, you say you want to show one of the trailers you want to explain to before we show it. I know we talked a little bit with Dan, but I'll let you explain and let me know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I want to take a look at this trailer for From War to Wisdom, which is the film that Josh Heisel came to me again after a few years of getting to know him, and he said, hey, a lot of the guys that I fought with have come back and have started small programs, grassroots programs to help other veterans to get services that they need. And, not top heavy programs, like just a couple of guys helping a couple of guys, and he's like, we should do this movie called From War to Wisdom. And I was like, all right, well, sounds like a good idea. And Heisel being Heisel, he was pretty much like, no, this is happening. This is happening. This is your next movie,
right,
dude.
That's right.
And I was like, cool. Well, and if you know Josh, he's the guy who gets things done. So we started working on it in about 2011 together. And at the same time, we had just started a program called the Veterans Initiative at Common Ground on the Hill. And Josh brought a bunch of his buddies from 2-5 primarily down to that program. And so I started filming as these guys reunited. And then, we went out and included a couple other veterans from outside that circle who found us because they started seeing our trailers and stuff. So I just thought I'd show a trailer that shows a little bit of my editing style, storytelling style, and kind of gives a glimpse into these natural born leaders who served in the Corps and throughout the United States Armed Forces, who, again, I see as key to developing a brighter future, not only in their service in wartime, but even more importantly, in coming back, surviving that experience, whether they're in combat or not, surviving their service, and then being able to help each other lift everybody up and take it one step forward. So why don't we take a look at that, and then we can talk about some of the stuff we see in that trailer.
Here we go.
Recon by fire, gentlemen.
The way we are in combat, and you never leave anyone behind. And that doesn't change when you get home.
I think vets really need to help vets and let them know, dude, it's gonna be all right.
Trying to piece together who we were before with who you are now, Of course it's a struggle, but I think it's just a matter of, finding that new mission again, having that support structure in place and, knowing that we're not crazy. There's a whole generation of veterans just like you that are going through the same things you are.
My desire to serve my country and all that didn't end the day I got my DD-214. I want to help people, and I'm starting with people like me, other veterans. And that's what we did in the military, and that's what we did in the Marine Corps. You helped a buddy out. I'm not going to stop doing that now. Once a Marine, always a Marine.
Can you imagine an entire company of Marines, the greatest fighting force in the world, all dedicated to doing good for the rest of their lives? It's out there. People are doing it, and I just think that story needs to be told.
Wow, that's deep. That's deep. And I was a great. I watched. It was really good. And for the audience, Dan, how was it filming that? How was it interacting with all these veterans?
It was pretty wild. Again, and back to the question of how do I choose who I work with? Like this again, this is very much a case where the story chose me. So, Josh and I became really good friends, and then when we started that initiative, he brought a handful of Marines to the summer workshops, and I think 2012 or 13 was the first year. Yeah. And again, these guys were not that far out of their combat deployment, like a couple years, but in Marine years, that's like seconds. They were
right.
These guys still couldn't sleep. I mean, you were there, like we were up all night because these guys were still very much in that locked and loaded, hyper vigilant state a lot of the time. And for a civilian, despite the fact that I've studied Marine Corps history and all that, I'm a civilian and there's a divide there. But because Josh vouched for me and basically said, you can trust this guy, they gave me the benefit of the doubt and got to know me and started telling me stories. And kind of, we were singing songs late at night in the camp and sharing stuff back and forth. These guys started writing poetry and stuff to almost joking at first to kind of get some of their trauma out, because Common Ground is just the kind of place where you can get a grunt to write poetry, and the guy started to trust me. So by the time I started turning the camera on, we had already broken through this mentality where they might have had some concerns, but they basically put aside any concerns they had about whether I was going to authentically tell their stories and be respectful of the things they were telling me, right? Because if you want to be a successful documentarian, you have to have the trust of the people you're working with.
Yeah.
Or your story is only going to go as deep as a conversation with a stranger on an airplane. You want to get to real life experiences of military veterans who have done and seen things that most of us will never have to do or see. And the experiences they had coming back, which in the case of combat veterans, a lot of times is just as traumatic or even more traumatic in some ways, according to them, right? This is not my experience, as combat itself was, because it's almost like there's rules for what you got to do when you're there, but there's no manual for when you come back. You know what I mean? There's no way to, there's no book that says, okay, well, what do you do when, the combination, the cocktail of drugs you're getting from the VA and alcohol you're using to subdue your emotions conflicts with your ability to interact with your family, to hold down a job, whatever it is. There's no rules for that. And for years, for generations, veterans were just expected to figure it out. We always hear these stories of the greatest generation and the post-World War II guys who came home and they just handled it. Well, they did just handle it. We think they just handled it, or they pretended they just handled it, maybe because the society expected that. But I can tell you from experience that my grandfather, who was pulling triggers in Okinawa and Peleliu, did not handle it. I mean, he got through, but late into his 80s, he was having episodes from traumas he had never confronted, So telling those stories was an extremely emotional process for me, because they were sharing things with me that in a lot of cases they hadn't even shared with their own families.
Right.
And, the responsibility that I had to not use any of those stories as to serve my own needs, right? To not take traumatic details or take footage of graphic violence and use that to try to get clicks and hits and views. Was a burden I took very seriously. I mean, a lot of the footage that I used in that film was recorded by a journalist named Mike Saray, who's a Marine Corps veteran and who was embedded with 2-5 during the invasion and also in Ramadi. So Mike was filming Fox 2-5 as they went through the war, so that the footage is not stock footage. It's actually these guys in combat. And some things happened in the course of that filming that, Mike and I talked about, and basically we're never showing that to anybody. You know what I mean? Guys, you know what I mean? They're already reliving a lot of this stuff every night as it is. So I had to be really careful with how I told these stories. You know, so that was a real learning experience. And, you know, it's probably the proudest moment of my whole career that when that film was released, so to a man, all of these guys said, like, you got it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You did not misrepresent us. You did not misrepresent the complex emotions that go along with pride for service, and also maybe guilt and shame about some of the things that happened while you were in service. Well, again, whether you're in combat or not, nobody ever talks about that when they thank you for your service on an airplane.
Right.
Nobody ever says, how do you balance out your intense pride for the things you accomplished and also this dread that you have that somebody might know about some of these dark things that you experience, right? And so, like, as a society, we don't go there. So I feel like this film went there a little bit, and, you know, I'm very proud for my part that seems to have benefited some of these guys who all of whom I call good friends, you know? And
no, it was great. I mean, Dan, what they gave you was sacred, and you did not abuse it. You're absolutely correct. You capture exactly what it was for, because it does take a lot for a veteran to trust somebody who hasn't, you know, been there. But they gave you all. I remember watching it, and they were authentic. They were deep, and it was hard on a lot of them. I remember that. Just reliving that, it's not always easy. You know, so I get it. We had a question. I think we had a question real quick before we go on break. Let me see. Eva from the People's Magazine, I think she said, how do you get funding to develop a film project? It was one of the questions.
Tooth and nail. That's how. It's very, very difficult. I'm not gonna lie, for an independent documentarian. For Word of Wisdom, we did an Indiegogo fundraiser, which is a lot like Kickstarter, right? It's a crowdfunding source. So, you know, we pieced together like maybe 10 grand there. We had some like angel investors, you'd call them, people who were exposed to the Veterans Initiative at Common Ground, who were people of means, who gave us a couple grand here and a couple grand there. And we basically, like, by hook and crook, we pieced together, you know, I think about $40,000 to put this film together. And, you know, it took about 5 years. So you can do the math. Like, I'm not driving a Bentley, you know, but you kind of, you put in a lot of sweat equity. You get the support of organizations like Common Ground. You know, we had all the veterans show up in one place. I was at Common Ground anyway. It didn't cost me a whole lot of money to go film these stories. And at a certain point, as an independent, you just decide, like, this is a story that's got to be told. So, you know, if I go into debt to tell it, I go into debt to tell it. I mean, I it's not a great business model, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get the story out there. But there were a lot of generous people, individuals who kicked in and supported us, you know? Yeah,
absolutely. There was, I remember when you guys were doing that, everybody gave, and it was worth it, you know? And there was, let me see, we got one more question. Let me see if I find it. And somebody said, Eva said, I self-funded and did my own editing and everything for context on my documentary. Kudos, you had some help. I knew nothing about the industry. She said, thank you, Dan. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and keep at it. I also film and edit all my own material. I do my own promotion. I mean, if you're a passionate storyteller, you will have to make some sacrifices to get those stories out there. And I will encourage you to just keep going. And also, not every film you make or story you tell has to be an Oscar winner. They don't all have to be 90 minutes long. These days, you can make a 90-second piece of media with the phone in your pocket even.
Yeah.
And if it is important enough and authentic enough, people are going to respond to that. So, you know, that's another thing that a lot of times young filmmakers think they got to go out there and be Martin Scorsese, or they got to produce like these high polished documentaries you see on and stuff. I tell people all the time, we've got 300 million people in this country, and 250 million of them have one of these in their pocket, and you can make a movie with this now, you know? So we can all be social change agents, journalists, documentarians, or influencers, whatever we want to be. It really comes down to, is your message, will it resonate? And it generally is going to resonate for one of two reasons: either because it's negative clickbait, which unfortunately passes as, the most popular material in our culture a lot of times, or because it's touching on emotions that are universal. And if you can tap into that, whether it's a veteran story, an immigrant story, your own grandma, everybody's got a grandma, right? Like, you can connect with people, but you got to earn their trust. And you, again, just back to our first conversation we had at the top of this show, you do that neighbor by neighbor, one person at a time. And that's how you get in there.
We're going to go on break, and we come back. We're going to discuss Slinger.
Cool.
And get into that. All right.
It's the guts and it's the glory. 100 stripes, 100 stories. It's the Pledge of Allegiance on the 4th of July. It's them handwritten letters from home. It's them sleepless nights alone. It's his newborn baby he left with his wife. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, hear the line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. Hey. From the fields of Indiana to the swamps of Louisiana, to the golden coast of California, Uncle Sam's the only family he's got. His purple heartbeat won't stop, and his 18th birthday was the day he was born. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, hear the light. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, stand on the front line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, pay the ultimate price. He was the man of the house when he was born. His family is proud but torn. But if you knew him, you would understand. He was raised on how to be brave, just to see the flag still wave. And then he came home with only one hand. 'Cause Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, hear the light. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, stand on these front lines. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, he'll pay the ultimate price. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down his life. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. March in line, march in line. Hey. Hey.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back. Every time I hear that song, I get goosebumps. That is just one of the. It's awesome. So it's deep to me. So we left off on when we're talking about the movie, but a lot of things that I know veterans can do is like mentorship programs. Like Josh is doing. That is just really, really stupendous. And for the audience, Josh will be here next week. We're gonna get a chance to talk to him for Veteran Days weekend, so you can actually hear from Josh. But I think we left off. We wanted to talk about Slinger, Dan, and if you can talk about that before we show into what it is.
Sure thing, yeah, and yeah, I was just about to plug. Tune in next week because Josh Heisel is a guy you're gonna want to talk to, and you can ask him how his experience was with Word of Wisdom. He might tell a totally different story than I did, so you can
that's right.
Take that for what it's worth. Conflicting sources. Maybe he'll be like it was hell on wheels trying to teach this civilian how to understand this stuff, but yeah, so on to Slinger. So again, I've just been like blessed to meet a lot of really amazing people in my life. So when I went off from the tiny town in Maine to college in upstate New York, I went to Ithaca College film school, and one of the guys I met early on in my film schooling was this guy, Aaron, who we all know now as Marble Slinger. So Aaron was another avid film buff. He and I were into the same music. We talked about film all the time, stayed up all night talking about punk rock and this and that and the other. Believe it or not, I used to be a punk rocker. I know I don't look like that now. But you know, I've seen you running marathons in a tutu, but you never know from this angle, you know. We all have many different lives. But,
we do.
Slinger was this dude who he was like an artist at heart. It was like brilliant mind, like really firing all the time. And about a couple years into like our college career, he got turned on. He had traveled on fish tour, and he had hitchhiked across the country and done all this kind of cool beatnik stuff. And he came across glass blowing. He discovered like that glass. People were making cannabis pipes out of glass, and they were popping up on Grateful Dead tour. And so rewind, this is like 1995, 1996, cannabis culture, or let me say that cannabis laws were much, much different. I mean, anybody, Gen Z, like younger people now, they understand cannabis as something that you can literally go legally buy in a store that is measured out like almost like by FDA standards, like what you're taking, how much it is, and you know, the quality control and all that stuff. Rewind to 95, 96, cannabis culture was very much an outlaw culture. A lot of people were using it recreationally just for fun, but people were using it medicinally even, and mainstream culture didn't even believe that was a thing. You could go to serious prison time for like small amounts. And so Slinger got really turned on in this idea of glass as an artistic medium, but also he had always been a cannabis activist and a really wild, trippy guy. And he believed that cannabis was a beautiful medicinal plant that also had the ability to open up people's minds to have more creative experiences. And, you know, just to tie this back to Word of Wisdom real quick, you know, cannabis as a medication is one of the few things that many of the veterans that I know have been able to use to treat everything from insomnia to digestive issues and all kinds of different things that they go through. That has given them better results than a lot of the other medications they got. Pharmaceutical medications, self-medication through alcohol, which is a big thing among all kinds of different populations.
Oh yeah.
And weed basically helped a lot of these guys. So, you know, it still gets this kind of bad rap as you know, just a drug that people use to get high, but there's a lot more to it than that. And so I always respected Slinger for his activist outlook. When he started making glass pipes and kind of, we started going in separate directions in our lives because we were getting out of college. And I remember thinking, you're going to spend the rest of your life really like down in a basement on a torch, like making little tiny janky glass pipes, like for a living, dude? Like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
Well, 10 years later, he comes back from the West Coast and has become like a really respected glass artist. And he and I made a film together called Degenerate Art about the art and culture of glass pipes. That was like a huge cult hit and was on Netflix for a bunch of years. And I got reintroduced to the glass community. And so a few years later, he had moved back to Philadelphia, and we hung out, you know, a bunch. And at one point, I had some downtime between projects. I didn't really have any funding, but I was hanging out with Slinger, and he was like, "What are you working on next?" And I was like, "Well, nothing at the moment, you know." Yeah. And he was like, "Well, I don't know why you're sleeping on the Slinger documentary. You're the only guy who can tell it." He's like, a lot like Heisley's very magnetic personality.
Right.
I'm in his studio with all my gear, and I just started filming him. So we can check out the trailer, but it's basically an artist portrait of this friend of mine and how he went from being kind of this outlaw, kind of cannabis enthusiast to one of the most famous and respected glass pipe makers and glass artists and multimedia artists in this amazing subculture that has blossomed into like $1 billion industry.
Wow.
We'll talk about this a little bit more, but glass pipes are not like the ones you see in the corner gas station is not what I'm talking about. Making these quality pieces. I have friends who have had glass pipes that have been on display in the Smithsonian collection and in major museums around the world. And this has only happened in the last few years, largely due to Slinger's efforts in making that first movie that he made. So I was honored to tell his story. He's a good friend of mine. Again, he let me into his life and into his studio, no holds barred. He trusted me to tell his story. So we could take a look at that trailer and it'll give you an idea of how fun this guy is to hang out with.
All right, let's see it.
I've always seen glass pipe making as an extension of legalization activism, a protest of saying, we believe that cannabis is beautiful, it's not this evil devil weed, and to do that in an artistic way with pipes was just the perfect thing for me.
He's had an immense impact, and he continues to progress and try new techniques and do stuff that expresses himself as an artist.
I mean, dude, the guy's resume, like glass artist, graphic designer, apparel company owner, and filmmaker.
I don't know what it is about the dude, but he's just got this like special touch. You're just like, what is that? It's a slinger, it's a slinger, it's a slinger.
I love experimenting, I love creating visual art, but glass will always be at my heart, always be the main thing that I come back to and be the foundation of what I'm doing. I have lots of interesting ideas in the back of my head, and I don't want to die without doing them.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Wow, that beautiful.
Slinger, man, he's a trip.
Wow, that is every time I see it, I see something new I didn't see before. That's really cool. And you've known him since college, then? This gentleman?
Yeah, I've known him going on about 30 years to the day almost, and he's a great dude. He just celebrated his 50th birthday, and he's over in Thailand right now. He loves to visit Thailand, and so this film is screening at a Cannabis Culture Film Festival next Friday in Camden, New Jersey. And I hit him up and I was like, hey, man, the film's going to be in this festival. It's like 20 minutes from where we live. What's your deal? You want to go? And he's just kind of sent me a picture of swimming with turtles. He's like, dude, I'm in Thailand for a month. You know what I mean? And this guy lives the dream, man. He created this. He made his name making pipes, and it took a long time to get beyond. Dude was eating ramen for years, But slowly but surely, and because of this film he made to celebrate this subculture, he got a big name in the scene. His work started selling for more money. He constantly pushed his artistic boundaries, and his work is amazing to see. These functional pieces, and now these big institutions in glass, like Corning Museum and various museums and galleries, used to really not want to associate with pipe makers because it was a very taboo subject. And now they're very much embraced across the culture. And you can find these pieces in museums. There's pieces that sell for $100,000 plus.
Wow.
massive creations that nobody in their right mind would probably ever actually smoke out of. They're more like museum pieces. And, this is interesting. Slinger's, a 50-year-old dude with interests that range from film to social justice to multimedia art to the history of music. And he's a brilliant guy. And, many people have asked some of these more famous pipe makers, now that you've made it, why do you keep making pipes? You could be making just plain old glass creations that would be celebrated because there wouldn't be the taboo, and you could, you could open up your market and you could tell your mom what you do for a living, all this kind of stuff. And, Slinger and another artist by the name of Jason Lee actually said this very, very well. He basically said, and Jason Lee is featured in Degenerate Art, which is on both. All these films are on Amazon right now. You can look any of them up and see them. But in Degenerate Art, somebody basically said, why would you keep pushing a bowl and turning this into a functional piece? Why would you tarnish this beautiful glass sculpture by turning it into a pipe? Like, why would you do that? Because when the movie came out 12 years ago, it was still very much a taboo subject. And Jason Lee said, because making it a pipe is the culture we came from, and it's the culture that we want to celebrate. And we don't want to co-opt ourselves into your BS mainstream bourgeois art glass culture. And this is was his opinion at the time. And Slinger also said, pushing a bowl in the piece and making it a pipe connects it to a subcultural movement that is intentional. This isn't just about getting high for these guys. This is about an activist subculture that challenged the status quo in terms of unjust cannabis laws, which again could put a grandma or a veteran in prison who was using cannabis legally, or a lot of other people were really put at risk. And of course, Black and brown populations being targeted in incredibly unjust ways for simple cannabis possession, doing hard time in maximum security prisons for very small amounts of cannabis, right? And again, I'm not advocating for organized crime or selling drugs on the street and all that kind of thing. I want to be clear. There's a difference between advocating for just treatment for people who want to responsibly use cannabis either recreationally or medicinally versus what I see as a necessary responsibility on the part of law enforcement, for instance, to be aware of criminal activity around drug distribution in general. I just want to make that clear. Slinger's thing is that this is an intentional subcultural outlaw movement that is very much aligned with the spirit of graffiti artists in New York City. I mean, you grew up in New York. You know, guys were going all city. It was illegal to tag a train car. Half of the reason they did it. Skateboarding culture. Skateboarding was a crime when I was a kid. Now Tony Hawk's up there with Joe Montana as a sports hero. He's got a video game and it's in the Olympics. But when we were kids, you get arrested for skating in the wrong place. Not as bad as you would for cannabis possession, but that outlaw nature is what drew these guys to the scene, and it's the reason they continue to do it. Not only that, but of course there's a major market for these kinds of art pieces.
Right, absolutely.
So again, back to our original conversation about leadership. Okay, so how does a pipe maker tie into my vision about leadership and creating positive cultural change or positive social change? Well, again, if you can create a cultural shift through pop culture that encourages a greater understanding of the underlying reasons that large portions of our population find themselves drawn to cannabis, either for a safer recreational drug, again, as compared to alcohol, which I have personally seen tear people to shreds, and which nearly tore me to shreds at times in my life. Or heroin, which has killed more of my friends than I care to mention. Whether it's someone who's seeking a safer recreational outlet or someone who's using this for legitimate medicinal purposes, which are only beginning to be understood. His commitment to the art of the pipe is tied into that political movement. And so again, if we can shift popular culture, which is the thing that we eat and drink all day, every day, and create a greater understanding of these issues, then that is going to be more impactful in a lot of ways than legislation or top-down, political movements or what you read in the news, that kind of thing. So I don't know. And, Slinger's the kind of guy who thinks even more deeply than I do about this stuff. So I'm not putting words in his mouth. These are conversations we've had. Like, he's one of his most famous images is because he's a pop artist as well. So he was really inspired by Banksy and Andy Warhol and like basically co-opting corporate images and logos in order to make artistic statements. Like Warhol's famous for that, for many things, but that Campbell soup can.
Yes.
Andy Warhol took that can and turned it into pop art.
Yeah.
And he was basically commenting on the fact that art, in his view, had become commodified. It was a product, and you needed to be a millionaire to buy these things from these museums in New York and put it on your wall. And Slinger co-opted this Morton Salt Girl logo at one point, which is like, when it rains, it pours. It's this girl walking through the street with the umbrella, and he put an AK-47 in her hands. So, and he called it the Morton Assault Girl. And he says in the movie, he talks about the origins for that image and how he wasn't really trying to make a statement about gun violence or anything like that. He just kind of had an epiphany that this would be a fly image that people would be gravitate towards, and it became a really famous image. I've seen stickers of that image in foreign countries that I know he hasn't been to. You know what I mean?
Wow.
But later he came to understand that the meaning of the image was changed by the way other people interpreted it. And it became, some people were wearing the t-shirt of that image because they supported gun rights, and they were like, yeah, hell yeah, I smoke weed and I support gun rights. Other people saw it as a protest against gun violence, and they were proudly wearing it to say, like, this is an abstract way of saying that this is an absurdist image, right? And so everybody had their own meaning.
How they interpreted it, right.
Everyone who wore that shirt drew a little more attention to Slinger and the art that he was making. So, again, I guess ultimately I struggle with this as an artist, whether or not art for the sake of art really deserves as much respect or makes as much of an impact as like direct social action to combat an injustice in our society, right? But something about celebrating beauty and providing creative outlets for people to get outside of their box and think in different ways and experience things in different ways. It may not be the same as like marching on Washington or something like that, or starting a program to directly service, unsupported individuals, but it does help to create this tapestry that we all live within. And if you can do that in a creative and responsible manner, and even an irresponsible manner. I mean, artists are under no burden to stick to the rules. In fact, the best ones never do. If you can spark ideas in people's minds, then you're doing a service to our culture as well. And I'll try to bring it back to our original conversation. If we're going to move our society forward, and we're going to get past this us versus them mentality that has poisoned our public discourse for the last decade and beyond, and the last couple months, I mean, I'm just barely holding it together with the amount of hatred that's being flung around in our society right now. If we're going to get past that, it's going to take efforts of a lot of different kinds. And it's going to take embracing people who are different than us. And it's going to take peace activists to understand that veterans are not a problem, right? Because, when Josh showed up at Common Ground, a lot of old civil rights activists and peaceniks were pointing at him going, we didn't fight. That was not our war. You didn't do it in our name. And, he was like, oh, I'm your whipping boy, because that's not how it's going to go down. That's not going to get us anywhere.
No.
Right? Point fingers at immigrants and saying, you are the problem. You're trying to steal my resources. That is, first of all, it's not true. There are so many misconceptions about, undocumented immigrants may be paying taxes because they are forced to report under false pretenses. They're not getting the benefits. These are facts that people don't hear. There's a lot of misinformation about what's going on with undocumented immigrants, who you should never call illegal, by the way. That's just not understood. And the only way to have those conversations is to get to know people who don't present those issues in threatening manners, and to engage with our neighbors, you know. And I'm not saying I'm successful at that all the time at all. I am not a saint when it comes to this stuff. I'm trying to figure it out myself. But whether it's Josh Heisel and his Stories of the Marine Corps, or Marble Slinger and his crusade to like elevate cannabis pipes to high art, or a farm worker in the field of Delaware who walked across the desert to get into this country to make a couple dollars a day to send home, and who has become the scapegoat of this nation, when in fact they are the building block of our economy. Never mind beautiful human beings in most cases who are who you would welcome into the society and you would love to have as your neighbor, having your back when you need help. You know, and I'm saying that based on experiences I've had and people I've met and connected with, right?
Yes,
we need to get to know each other again if we're going to have any hope. So, like, no matter what happens in this election upcoming, if we don't figure out as individuals how to build bridges in our society and agree to agree more than, you know, and agree to disagree, but agree that that we have more in common than what divides us, then I don't care who ends up sitting on the Iron Throne. Like, there's no hope for this democratic experiment if we don't figure out how to get to know each other again. So, you know, when it comes down to why I do the work I do, I believe that media is a tool to express ideas that can reach different audiences. I'd like to spend the rest of my career and life trying to get better at that and try to find wider audiences and deeper ways to influence small circles of people to create the kind of change that I hope we see in the world.
Dan, I mean, that is incredible. You are making a difference. I can tell you that you are, from the people I've talked to from Common Ground, but we all bring something to the table. You know, people always judge you before they even meet you, you know, and it's challenging sometimes, you know, but, you know, it sounds kind of corny, but we all have to find common ground, right? So we all can, you know, be at the table. And that's so important, you know. And I know as a vet, it's been challenging, and sometimes we have to assimilate those that are in charge just to get along. Not saying I agree with it, but I have to. A lot of times, I've always had to do that. Take a knee. I say, got you. If I become subservient, then I get what I need. You know, we've had to do that, but so does people from other countries have had to do that. So I can totally agree, and I truly understand that, having, you know, a lived life, as we call it, you know. But before we go, what else? What other future projects you're looking at, or what other things you're looking at? Are you going to stay with this stream? You know, what are you looking at in the future?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a couple projects. So currently, again, there's all of the films we've talked about today and many more are already out and in distribution. My newest film about Paul Stankard, who's a glass artist, just entered his 81st year, and he's focused on capturing the beauty of nature in glass, and is a much more traditional fine artist than like Slinger is, but knows Slinger and like hangs out with him, you know.
Right.
That film will be coming out by the end of the year, also on Amazon and Vimeo Plus, and possibly other outlets as well. I have a film in the can, as they say, that I have not edited yet, about a Cuban glass artist. I traveled to Cuba a few times a few years ago with a friend of mine. We found a glass artist down there who is doing blown glass in a studio that he built from scratch using all recycled materials. If you know anything about Cuba, there's a real dearth of resources there. So this guy built a hot glass furnace, you know, and many of his tools from scratch. He's got kilns where he fires his work and cools it that are built out of stones, you know, and it's like, it's a crazy environment. And this guy's amazing. You should meet him, Jose. His name's Eduardo Galliano, and he's a lot like Josh Heisel. He's like just a big bull of a guy, and he's just like, he's like intimidating, but heart of gold. So that film is called Fuego. And you can see that trailer also on my website on dancollinsmedia.com. Fuego's awesome. I hope to find the time to edit that on nights and weekends, basically over the next few years. Part of the reason I'm taking, I call it a little sabbatical from active film production right now, because I decided to enroll in graduate school. It's something I've wanted to do since college. So I'm studying strategic leadership in a master's program right now.
Okay.
And while I did that, I didn't want to have to hustle film because, as we
Right.
described, it's it's hard to make a living and it's hard to get the funding, and you got to really focus on that. So I took an employment opportunity at Lehigh University, which is a really great institution here in Pennsylvania. It's a great school. It's a research-focused school with really strong liberal arts programs as well. So I work in their communications office, creating short-form media to try to express their mission statement, their strategic plan. It's been really awesome to work with another team of creative individuals, which is also a challenge for me because I've been running my own show for a decade. All of a sudden, I got to work with 20 people to figure out what's going to land, and the approval process is something I'm still getting used to because usually I'm the approval process.
Right.
But I mean, I had 6 grunts as my approval process for Word of Wisdom. So if you can, if you can pull that off, you can pretty much do anything.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Fuego will come out eventually. I'm committed to that. I don't know how long it's going to take, but that'll be out at some point. And in the meantime, I'm going to dig into this university experience. I might be there for the next 20 years. I don't really know.
Yeah.
And I just decided it was time to level up a little bit and figure out how I can take these ideas and either use media more effectively to create greater waves of change, or to possibly lean into a new career shift where leadership in the nonprofit world or in some kind of direct action in service to democracy and the preservation of the ideals of this nation that I believe in, which are embracing the beautiful differences that make up this vast country, defeating and defying hatred, not only as a concept, but as a tool for political discourse and action, which I just think is like one of the worst things we've seen develop in the last decade as we entered this digital age. Rejecting hate, embracing positivity, and not in like a kumbaya kind of way where it's just like surface efforts and a bunch of like lighthearted language about unity. I mean, I'm talking about truly embracing the differences between our communities. I mean, if people who look different, speak different languages, come from different backgrounds, who would normally you would never think if they met on the street they would get along. If you put them together in the right circumstances, 9 times out of 10 they're going to get along and they're going to have things in common. So I'm all about trying to figure out what I can do in the future to help that process happen. So we'll see what happens, man. I'll keep you posted for sure.
We'll be in touch, or me and you will see each other, Dan, and we'll be in touch. And I just want to say thank you for giving us your insight, your knowledge, and to me, your love. I consider it love. It's a
hell yeah, I love you, man.
Hey, brother, it's all about love, and I know the audience will get something out of it. So I just want to say thank you for being here and sharing yourself with us, with me, because it means a lot to me, man. And I learned a lot, and I always grow through it. So I just want to say thank you, brother, for everything, and we may have you once el fuego sale, te voy a llamar de mi hermano. Vente para acá. So, hey, let's do this.
Por favor.
Por favor, gracias por todo. No. Thank you again, Dan, for just giving us so much information and a lot we can share. Let me see if I got one more. Somebody said a comment. Let me see what they said before we go. They said, here we go. She said, great episode. Eva said, great episode. So we had a great guy, Mr. Dan. So with that being said, gracias, namaste. Thank you for your love, brother.
And de nada, gracias, amigo mío. And keep doing what you're doing, man. You are an inspiration to me. You know that, and to a lot of other people. So I'm really stoked to see what you're doing here, man. Any way I can support, I will.
Thank you. So it's about spreading joy and love, bro. In the end, like you said, man, just coming.
I'll be on next weekend, calling in, giving highs.
Yeah, no, you. By the way, we'll have Josh next weekend right here. And we're gonna compare and say, hey, you know what Dan said about you, and he's gonna come over. So yeah, it's gonna be great, man. But everybody, good night, audience. To you, thank you for being here. It means a lot to us. Adios. Good night. Bye bye.
All right, brother. See you soon.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.